Ruto's Kenya never ceased to disappoint us. Now, Kenya signs a unilateral trade agreement with the European Union, which is called Economic Partnership Agreement, which is betraying the Eastern African community. Hello, I am Mahlet, Ayele, your host at Connect Africa, bringing you the latest from the continent. Now, in this video, we try to present to you, by bringing a different question so that it can give you a full round of understanding of this situation. First of all, what is this, the status of the European Union and the Eastern African Community Trade Agreement. Number two, we will ask why Kenya signed this economic partnership agreement with the EU unilaterally. Number three, we ask why the Eastern African community itself did not sign this agreement. What are the reasons? Number four, what are the impacts of Kenya's going ahead and signing this unilaterally? What does it mean for Kenya? What does it mean for the region as a whole? And finally, as number five, I'm going to throw something, the irony of Kenya, or William Ruto of Kenya, continues. Now, when we look at number one, to try to answer the first question, which is what is the background of this Eastern African Community and European Union trade agreement? It was initiated in 2014. It was after a decade now, Kenya signing this unilaterally. Okay, so at that time, for 2 years it was back and off, on agreement, but finally some countries did not sign it, for various reasons. They abandoned it. Some, like Kenya and Rwanda, they have signed it, but only Kenya in 2016 it has ratified it. Now, after almost a decade, in 2023, or after maybe you can say 7 or 8 years, in last year around this time, the European Union go ahead mysteriously with Kenya, while the Eastern African Community contains the whole, it has Rwanda at that time, it has Kenya, it has Tanzania, Burundi, Rwanda. So, but it goes with only Kenya and signs this agreement. Why? We will come back to it. And then for a year, it was until 2024, until this time, July 2024, it was open because the European Union then has to take it, it should have been reviewed by the legislators, so in general by the European Union Council. So finally, it is the European Union Parliament has approved it. So now it is forced. But I want you to mark this. Although it went to the European Parliament to be approved, Kenya was already enjoying that trade agreement, which was, set temporarily until it's approved. So from that time, Kenya's market or products have had access to, which is a tax-free, to the European market, and same thing for the European Union. Mind you, Kenya is one country. European Union consists of 27 of them. Now, secondly, my second question was that why Kenya, how Kenya signed this unilaterally. But before that, let me just give you, I think better to continue on the background, why the Eastern African Community did not sign it. Now, for example, Tanzania, after, looking at it and reviewing it, its intellectuals, the trade ministry, the legislators, the policy officers and everything. And then they said this have an implication on the long-term ambition or agenda of Tanzania to be industrialized. So since it has an impact, they have simply dropped it. Uganda, almost the same thing. I think Uganda it was just from the beginning non-committal to this thing. So I think it has realized very early that this is another neo-colonial trap. So they refused to fall for it. And actually they gave a reason, which is, I will quote, it is it's against their strategic industrial development. So that's why they were non-committal to it. Now, Burundi at that time when it was initiated in 2014 and then 2016, around those years, it was under sanction. The EU sanctioned Burundi for some reason. And now coming to Kenya and Rwanda, they have signed it, but it was only Kenya who has ratified it in 2016. And now, they went ahead with it, negotiated, and this and that. Now, let's come to, the question of how Kenya signed this. Now, look, the Eastern African community, most of them, they have abandoned it. And the reason is that I said, okay, for Uganda and Tanzania, their legislator have checked it, this and that. But what did they check? What did they find out? Now, if I may mention some figures for you, for example, look, for Kenya, now, if you look at the market, okay, the Eastern African community, first and foremost, it is the REC of the African Union. It's, the African Union has this RECs, economic commissions around like for West Africa, it's ECOWAS. For East Africa, it is Eastern African Community. For South Africa, it's SADC. For Central Africa, it has something as well. And the North has something as well. I mean, I just forgot the acronym. Now, let's see some numbers. For example, if you look at the better market for Africa is in Africa. Just have this in mind. The better market for Africa, whether you are from West, East, South, it doesn't matter. The best market and the bigger market is in Africa, not in the UE, in the European Union, not in the United States, or not in China. Now, if you look at some figure, for example, Kenya's export to the European Union, by looking at its 2022, it was 1.3 billion. Now, if you look at the other way, EU's export to Kenya, it's 2.2 billion. Now you make the mathematics, who is benefiting more out of this agreement? It's 27 of them against a single country, okay? Now, let's see Kenya, let's compare this now to East Africa. Now, Kenya's export to Eastern African community in 2021 was actually $2.5 billion. Okay, $2.5 billion. Now, what does it get from the EU? $1.3 billion. It's almost by more than 50%, more than 100% actually. Now, the Eastern African community to Kenya Kenya was importing only around 837 million. So it has bigger market in Eastern African community alone. Now, but the Eastern African community, so it remains to be the biggest market for Kenya. Now, usually what Kenya exports to the European Union is it's a primary goods like fruits or coffee or tea or flowers. It's not something that's manufactured, and that has an effect on on the markets. Okay. 91% of its export it's a primary good. Now it's only 6% which is a manufactured good. Now let's compare the Eastern African community to Africa, how big market it has. Now the Eastern African community market to Africa, its export, to the rest of Africa, it was 40% was primary good, but the rest 60% was process manufacturers, like you can see soap, machinery, cement, palm oil, a coated flat iron. All these things have got their market, so it was bigger, and the money, as I mentioned, for example, Kenya's to Eastern African community was $2.2 billion. So why in the heck you going and try to find a tax-free market in Europe while you have a better market here? And it's going to be better, even the African Continental Free Trade Area, if countries like Kenya do not continue to betray Africa, let's say that. Otherwise, we don't get anywhere. It will be just a talk. Now, these figures will tell us two things, okay? Number one, Actually, Africa is more important or far more bigger for Eastern African markets than Europe. Europe significantly plays no role at all. 91%, 60% of manufactured goods were exported to the rest of Africa from the Eastern African community, and 40% were primary. Whereas when you go to Europe, you export only because they don't allow you, they don't trust you, and your industry is not, the Africa's industry is not bigger, not yet. It's not industrialized. It's just on the way. So when you go to Europe, 90% is the primary goods, just the tea, coffee, flowers. What else they will allow you actually to export? You tell me. And so it tells us, all this figure tells us two things. Actually, Africa is the bigger and the better market for anything, any goods that comes from Africa. Number two, it tells us that it supports, the Eastern African community industrial ambition, or the in the bigger picture, the Agenda 2063, in which one of its flag project is the African Continental Free Trade Area. It's all intertwined. You support one, you market, you get your market within Africa, then ultimately you are fulfilling the Agenda 2063. Ultimately, you are encouraging that African Continental Free Trade Area, because there is this free movement of people, goods, services, all those things. Okay, you will enable that. Now let's go to the third question, which is answering you, what is, why is the reason that the EU signed this European partnership, economic partnership agreement with Kenya. Now this is very simple. It's not a rocket science. For anyone who is familiar with the history of colonization as an African, as we should be, that we should be aware of it, and as someone who is familiar, the continuous and the constant agenda of the West in Africa, this is not a rocket science. Now, what European Union is doing is that it's just doing what it is best in doing at, which is colonization, which is divide and rule. Okay, now the others, you see that Tanzania and Uganda are dropping out. They see that this is a kind of a trap. There's no benefit, and it will affect their industrialization agenda. Then what did they do? They just drop out. So they go to Kenya and unilaterally they divide and rule you, they isolate you, and they make you to sign this agreement. And of course, when you have a leader like William Ruto and and others, it's not only William Ruto, there are a lot of them in Africa that betrays their own country and their own continent. So what does the EU want? The EU wants, they don't want you by any cost. It can be even by war. They will prevent Africa from becoming industrialized. That's what. There is this viral video by a Dutch professor which he has given in one of the social studies. The ISS, Institute for Social Studies in The Hague. It's very viral, like a 30-minute video. I forgot his name, but it really, a Dutch white man, okay? It explains really and details how the West is really adamant. They don't want Africa to be industrial. By any cost, they will prevent that. And that's exactly what they did. And with that, now it will bring a lot of things, a lot of problem in the region. Now, also, what the West wants is it's a colony, not a trade in Africa. They don't want partner, as opposed to China, Russia, or any other. They just want you to. They just want to continue looting your natural resource. So that's why they are taking only primary goods. The other thing is that, because the reason is that now the West wants, of course, as I said, to loot only the natural resources and isolating countries. Now with this they have managed. They have managed to isolate Kenya from the rest of the Eastern African community, or in the bigger picture, they have managed to isolate Kenya from Africa. And Also, if you look at it again in the bigger picture, Europe do not, or the US-led West do not want trade with Africa. Let's be real, okay? Let's call a spade a spade. They don't want trade. They just want to give you aid. And this is why sometimes you see from different African countries with a Twitter hashtag, not, trade, not aid, trade, not aid, with their, like the USA of the United States and GIZ of Germany. There are different organizations, that they have set up as if they're going to help you, but ultimately they loot a lot of things from you, and they get a bigger market in your, to just dump. They protect their producers, they protect their farmers, and they dump their thing in you tax free. It's 27 countries against one country, mind you, and that's it. Okay, then they maybe 2 coins or something they want to throw you as an aid, and they say, oh, we have donated this and that. Actually what they are doing is, even that aid, if you ask me and go analyze, it's something that is benefiting their farmers. They bring you in the name of aid grain, pesticide, or whatever, again, it's benefiting their own people. Okay, now let's go to the next question with the fourth one. What I said, what are now the impacts of this? First of all, this already in 2023, a year ago, when Kenya signed this, it has created, Ruto was just months old in office at that time, okay? It has created friction between countries. Now, CSOs, different civic society organizations, have advocated even to take it to the court that Kenya is betraying us. So, and it's gonna harm our market, the Eastern African community market. So now there were also new countries joining in. After that, the DRC have joined, Somalia has joined, and they said that their consent also has to be taken. So it has already this 1 year until the Parliament of the EU approves it. There was a lot of friction amongst these countries, why Kenya went ahead and signed this unilaterally. But first and foremost, what it does is it undermines the Eastern African community ambition, the unity of it, okay? And then it loses this, it makes it to lose this strength to negotiate stronger when you negotiate as Eastern African community, and when you negotiate as just as one country individual as Kenya, it's not the same. 27 of them and then one country. Isn't it better to be Eastern African community, which is also ultimately backed by the African Union? You go individually and you do for what? It's not benefiting your people. It's not benefiting the Kenyan farmers. It's not benefiting the region. You are hurting. You are causing problems, Now, another impact, what it does is also, this, you lose that ability to negotiate as a strong. Now, EU, with all those members, it's industrialized and it overpowers Kenya. Now, it's, if you are accustomed, familiar with Dr. Arikana's speech, most of the time she brings this example, how on earth countries like Djibouti, as small as Djibouti, and Lesotho can sit on the same table and negotiate with the United States, big countries, and economically speaking as well. How, small countries like this can negotiate with China or Russia or the EU as a whole, because usually they appear as together. So, one cannot really, it doesn't take so much time to think, unless you are a total sellout to do this. Now, it's, the thing is that again and again, it brings us back this unite or perish of Kwame Nkrumah's, what, in his speech in 1963 during the establishment of the Organization of African Unity. Now, even if this is not Kenya signing this, eventually the goods that are, those goods coming from all those EU members in Kenya, they will find their way in other parts of the country, and particularly in the neighboring countries. So that means they will find their way in Eastern African Community, even if Eastern African Community is not a signatory of this economic partnership agreement with the European Union. Now, what will that do? Now, that is really a problem. Now, countries will start to block it because they want to protect their own products and their own traders, business people, or the private sectors in general. Now, we have seen this already in the past 1 year. It's just that Kenya is not taking its lesson. Now, we have seen Kenya blocking the Ugandan milk and egg. And there was at some point, I think, was it Ruto paid a visit to Uganda, and Yoweri Museveni brought it to his attention. Now, why those milk and egg of Uganda were banned? If you know, because those tax-free cheap European Union products come to there, and then you have to block the other one. It will force you behind the door. And then we have seen also in the past 1 year, Tanzania blocking Kenya's egg and chicken. Look at this now. The private sector in the middle is sandwiched, and you are harming your own economy. This is what you bring when you serve as a servant, or allowing yourself to be a Trojan horse for a country, let me say, even not west, not east, but that's outside of Africa. Now, another example I can give you, for example, in West Africa now, the US is dumping its genetically modified chicken in West Africa. Now, this is killing the farmers in West Africa as a whole. You can go to Nigeria, you can go to Ghana, or anywhere. Now, take KFC. Now, KFC, do you think it's taking chicken from the chicken sellers in West Africa? No, or even in Kenya. It's bringing those genetically modified chickens or from the US or from Ireland. It's supporting its own business. Even potatoes they are bringing from Europe. They're not taking from your country. This is how they kill your market, how they kill your farmers and make them out of the markets. And at the end, you're hurting your own country, and you end up adding tax and all this mess. Okay, now, so the purpose is very clear. This economic partnership agreement is to support their own farmers, to support their own, producers, and kill Africa, continue to exploit Africa, undermine the farmers. But ultimately, again, it undermines the Eastern African community, that spirit. And you make it lose that power to negotiate, to be on the table with EU. This it should be EAC versus EU, if not actually African Union and EU. Eastern African community is even much lower for the European Union. European Union should negotiate on the level of with the African Union. Okay, if not, okay, Eastern African communities, this wrecks the regional community associations, not individually. Countries like Kenya going and signing this. At last, this has taken me really more than I have imagined. But at last, I want to say this now. Again, the irony of William Ruto continues. We hear him a lot of Pan-African speech, especially championing and praising the African Continental Free Trade Area. We have heard this a lot of time. But again, he go and do this kind of unilateral agreement individually, betraying the African Continental Free Trade Area. That's why we say William Ruto do not walk his talk. That's why you see many Pan-Africanists are against him. But when he come, many were welcoming. So this is this unilateral agreement of Kenya with the European Union is undermining the Eastern African community spirit and making it lose that power, negotiating power, and creating friction within the country, and more bringing this divide and rule in the continent. Anyways, thank you very much for rooting, for tuning in. Thanks again, each and everyone, for your comment. I will see you again, actually, in 10 minutes. We have to be online with Kwame Gonza. So I'm going to see you in 10 minutes. So, but all of you, Yorubaland, Muhammad Musa, Sinovia, Dejuma, Alicia, Yorubalandia, SS Smith, Obiaman. What did I miss? Nothing. Yeah. Thank you very much for all your thing, for all your comments. Please go ahead, subscribe to the channel, like it, and share it. And you want to help us further, go to our PayPal account. Ciao, ciao.